other players on either side of the ball that you're just excited about that could break out this year?
For me personally, when I'm looking at the offense, I do want to see what Bru McCoy is going to bring from USC. The fact that he transferred in, he was part of that transfer portal class, and it's very unique going into the offseason because you talked about it, and a lot of people's like, Tennessee was, top 25 in recruiting, but they got a few pieces when it comes to their offense. They didn't get much added when it comes to their signing class. But the part that I'm really excited about is how smart Tennessee was with this recruiting class in bringing in somebody like a Bru McCoy, because yes, Cedric Tillman is going to be your WR1. He's going to be your go-to guy, but you still need to find that person that's going to help you replace Velus Jones in this. And there's a lot of pieces on this team, whether it's Jalen Hyatt that's going to be coming in, that says during the offseason and even during spring practice, he talked a lot about the fact that his game is improving. And I know a lot of that is going to be coach speak, and a lot of this we're not going to know about until Tennessee travels to Pittsburgh to see, because I'm not going to use Ball State as a real measuring stick from this. But for me, it is going to be the growth of this running game as well, with the Jabari Small, and seeing how well he's going to continue to grow as a running back in the kind of switchblade type of way that he has the ability, or I should say a Swiss Army knife, not a switchblade, but a Swiss Army knife, in his ability to catch the football out of the backfield as well as be able to run the football in between the tackles. Those are some things about him that I find to be very interesting. And still, you do have a Tennessee team that defensively, it's not that I'm excited about them. I just want to see them do better. I want to see them be able to get to the quarterback more, be able to make these stops, because being in this state now where you have a really good NFL football team, and now you want your college football team to be the same way. A lot of times you'll watch one game on Saturday and then turn around on Sunday and you're looking at what the Tennessee Titans are doing, and you're just like, man, we need a Big Jeff. We need some guy that's going to be able to disrupt that defensive line and disrupt the offensive line so that you could potentially get an edge rusher into the backfield and be able to get that sack. And I think what Tennessee was really lacking last year is that ability to do it. Also, it would be great if you were able to stop people on third down. I think that was another thing that really annoyed Tennessee Vols fans throughout the football season was, hey, it could be 3rd and 18, but you know how many yards the offense is about to get on this very next play? 18.5 yards. And it happened every single time. And it was extremely frustrating because it happened in the Ole Miss game. And you would see this defense get great stops on 1st and 2nd down and then struggle on 3rd down. And the 3rd down would be the reason why the drive continued for the opposing team. And I think that that's going to be a focus, and it has been a focus for Tennessee over the course of the last 6 or 7 months, because of the fact that they know that even though you had one of the best offenses in the SEC and arguably one of the best offenses in the nations, you also had one of the worst defenses in the SEC. And a lot of times when you're looking at the worst defense going along with an amazing offense, your defense doesn't have to be one of these defenses where you go in and you become this Alabama team from 2011 where you're only giving up 9 or 10 points a football game. You just don't need to give up 30 a game, because your offense is going to get you 30 points. You just need to average about 20 to 24 points per game on defense, which still means that, hey, you can give up 3 touchdowns and your offense is going to be able to potentially win you the football game still by 10 to 15 or 16 points. That's what I'm really focused on with this, is if this defense can just be about 4 to 5 points better than what they were last season, a 6-7 win season could potentially turn into a 9-10, and depending on which way a football drops here and there, an 11-win football team.
Yeah, and that's where I was headed with that, because right now Tennessee's in that cute stage of, wow, the offense is fun to watch. They're going to compete against South Carolina and Missouri and so forth, but they're going to get stomped in the SEC because you need to play big boy football. You need to come with defense, or otherwise you're just going to be another Mike Leach. Let's throw it 60 times. And I know Heupel's much more of a run game guy. But it's all going to be about offense and warp speed, but what's the substance going to be? So yeah, the recruiting on defense and really improving the guys that are there from that 21 season is going to be huge, obviously, on that side of the football, and starting to turn some of these 50-50 games, because that division's pretty much outside of Georgia on one end, Vandy on the other end. The other 5 you could throw in a bucket and say, hey, we don't know how this is going to go.
No, and that's what makes this football season extremely interesting, because you have Kentucky and you have somebody like a Will Levis, who is a lot of different NFL scouts are saying is the number one quarterback in the next year's NFL draft. And people kind of find it hard to believe, because Tennessee fans remember what he did against them up in Lexington last year. And they're like, how is this guy the number one overall prospect going into next year's draft? But then you continue to talk to a lot of scouts and they continue to say, look, no, he has a lot of qualities that you look for in the NFL. And it's very much like he's this year's Kenny Pickett. He's at a weird school. He's not at, Pitt used to be this amazing powerhouse when it comes to football and producing talent for the NFL. But you now look at what they are now, especially in the quarterback position. You're like, well, he's at Pitt. I don't know how good he's actually going to be. And honestly, we still don't know how good he's going to be in the NFL. But then turn around with the Will Levis of, well, he's at Kentucky and he may or may not have some weapons, but his mechanics are good. So that's what they're looking at. And people automatically want to say, well, Tennessee is going to travel and they're going to take on South Carolina at the end of the year. That's an easy dub. Look, Spencer Rattler could be the quarterback that we thought he was 2 years ago. You just mentioned a few minutes ago about how Hendon Hooker, when he was at Virginia Tech, had an amazing season and he was playing extremely well there before transferring away. And it's like, wait a second, was he really a find? I mean, you're talking about a guy that played very well up in Blacksburg, and now he comes to your school and he wasn't even the starting quarterback. Why? Spencer Rattler could be the exact same way with South Carolina, of maybe this is the Spencer Rattler that could turn into that number one, number two overall prospect, or could turn into that Heisman contender. And then through every bit of that, you still have Florida that's making a significant change with Bill Napier coming in as the head coach. But the good thing about a Florida team, which happens a lot of times, Tennessee gets them very early in the season. They're getting them in Knoxville. It's going to be a couple of weeks after the Pitt game, which a lot of Vols fans are seeing as a revenge game, because they believe that they should have won that game last year. And that was when Joe Milton was still the quarterback before he got pulled for Hendon Hooker. So there are those scenarios going into at the very beginning of this schedule. Look, every single fan base is a fanatic at some point in time, and they can go from 0 to 100 extremely quickly. The Tennessee Vols fan base is just waiting for a reason to get excited. They are. You've seen it in baseball with what Vitello has been able to do with that baseball program and them becoming the number one team in the nation and the swagger that they brought with them. Yes, it ended up them losing in the super regionals, but the Tennessee fan base grew so much that last year into this year, they're now having to talk about, hey, we need to expand Lindsey Nelson Stadium. You know the history of the basketball programs, both men's and women's basketball, with how excited that the fan base can be because of how good these basketball teams can be. And I am talking about both the men's and the women's basketball teams. This fan base is dying for Tennessee football to be what it was in the 90s and the early 2000s. They are dying for that ability for Neyland Stadium to be what it once was, and to be able to make it one of the scariest place, and to hear, it's football time in Tennessee and just have the chill bumps run down your arm because you're about to be doing well. This season is shaping up, as far as the schedule is concerning, for Tennessee to potentially go into LSU being 4-0. We don't know much about LSU this season and how good they're actually going to be. So if Tennessee beats LSU in October and they come back home to take on an Alabama Crimson Tide team in Neyland Stadium being undefeated, it's going to be a very rare opportunity to be like, this is that moment to see which direction your football program is going to go, because you're 5-0. That would be a time where College Game Day is going to be on campus. You're going to have everybody going crazy. It's going to be your 2:30 kickoff on CBS. And next thing you know, if you beat Alabama in Neyland Stadium, you are then going to skyrocket up the polls and skyrocket into people's minds when it comes to the college football playoff, regardless as to the fact that you still have to go to Athens and play the Georgia Bulldogs in November. If they go into the game against Alabama undefeated, this state could explode if they actually beat the Crimson Tide.